What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Drew Code Sports Talk. I am your host, Cody Johnson. And man, it has been a minute since I have hung out with you guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I have a lot of thank yous to get to. But first, before we get started, please do me a favor, subscribe to the YouTube channel, as you're probably watching this right now on YouTube. And after you do that, go and follow us on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, whichever your preferred social media app. Follow us there. We're available. Drew Code Sports Talk is the name, of course. But man, it has been, I think, 2 weeks since I've talked to you guys, and it has been a wild time. And not only the NBA, NFL. Right now, we're in the middle of March Madness, where I'm assuming everyone's bracket is broken. There's no remaining perfect ones as far as I'm aware. And certainly not mine. And funny enough, my 11-year-old, she did one in her class earlier this week. And already one of her Final Four teams is no longer in it. So nobody's bracket is safe right now. So happy March Madness to everybody. But I'm so glad to be joining you guys. A couple of housekeeping notes I do want to talk about. First off, earlier this week, we crossed over 400 subscribers on this channel, which is huge. I know that Drew right now is not with me, but he is the one that kind of birthed the idea of Drew Code. And, we did this together as a YouTube channel in my garage. And now it has been something that we both love to enjoy. And even though he can't do it, hopefully you guys feel his spirit to be around because, he still listens. He still sends me texts all the time. I still let him know how the show's doing. And he sends his love and his gratitude to 400 subscribers because it's a huge feat. And ironically enough, our first episode, I'm recording this right now on Saturday, March 22nd. And what's funny is I think our first episode 8 years ago was recorded or at least released on this day. So it's kind of funny. This is kind of like our 8-year anniversary, I suppose. And no better way than to say thank you for 400 subscribers. Very appreciative. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of, obviously, in between 8 years of life is a lot of absence and hiatuses and vacations, and also lots of expanding of families and, learning and meeting new people from not only social media, but just in general. So again, thank you guys for 400 subscribers. I don't know I hope we can continue to push it. I think now the next road is 500 and go from there, I suppose. So thank you guys again. Let's dive into the show because I've got quite a bit of notes here for you guys. Got NFL, got a little bit of some NBA talking here. So let's dive into it. So as everybody knows, free agency has been running wild. Obviously, a couple of weeks ago, it started with a lot of key signings. A lot of teams were active. Notably, the New England Patriots were pretty active. Chicago Bears were very active. And the 49ers were active, and a lot of their key players were actively being signed by other teams that were not the 49ers. So many that really too long to list right now, but essentially the team that they took to the Super Bowl just 2 seasons ago is not, a lot of them are no longer on the team. Deebo Samuel was traded to the Commanders. Christian McCaffrey, I heard that there was rumors that maybe, well, I wouldn't say there's rumors. There's an idea to think about or entertain a trade package to get rid of Christian McCaffrey. There's rumors that Brandon Ayuk is on his way out. A lot of key defensive players are no longer with the 49ers. 2 of their main linebackers signed with Denver, so that bolstered up their defense. So definitely some crazy free agency signings and deals that essentially are going to change a lot of how we see the NFL in this upcoming season. And I actually have some winners and I have some losers that I do want to talk about from free agency up to this date. Will we talk about the Raiders? Maybe not so much. I mean, they haven't really done a whole lot. A lot of their signings have been role players at best. Nothing that's really going to swing the pendulum one way or the other for the Raiders, outside of Geno Smith, of course, being acquired for a 3rd-round pick earlier this offseason, basically at the start of free agency. So the only thing that we haven't really gotten done yet is re-signing Geno Smith to an additional contract extension. So we will see what happens with that. But I do want to talk about winners and losers for both the AFC and the NFC teams, and I'm going to tell you why, in my opinion. So couple of winners I have for the AFC, and I have one distinct winner, but I will give some honorable mentions to Denver Broncos, Houston Texans, and the New England Patriots for what they've done for their offseason and free agency. Houston Texans, I think more on the defensive side as they've tried to bolster that up. I have a lot of questions as far as what they're going to do for their receiving weapons. Obviously, as everyone knows, Tank Dell is probably going to miss the entirety of next season because of the knee injury that he sustained. So that really only leaves them with Nico Collins, and then they just acquired Christian Kirk. So some rumors of who they probably should add on to the team in terms of receiver. I mean, you name a couple of receivers. I think Amari Cooper would fit that bill. Maybe they acquire a receiver. Stephon Diggs would be probably a good addition to bring back to the team since he's already familiar with CJ Stroud. And when he was on the field with CJ Stroud, they looked really good. So it's an idea there. But the Texans overall, though, their defense is what they're really trying to beef up and bolster in terms of like the linebacking core and making sure they keep in that cornerback core together as well. Denver Broncos, shout out to Nick, who is my cousin, Xbox Dad 559. He is obviously, as everyone knows, a stout, diehard Broncos fan. Before it was cool, we're talking back in John Elway, Ron Smith, Ed McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's father, way back in the day. He is an old school Broncos fan. I have them as one of the teams that was like an honorable mention to winning free agency just because of what they've been able to do on the defensive side of the ball. And also they did bring on a great tight end weapon, in my opinion, even though Evan Ingram was battling injury with the Jaguars last season. When he was on the field with the Jaguars, clearly was a weapon that Trevor Lawrence was looking for. He really made that offense look a lot better. And so you add that now to the Denver Broncos with Sean Payton, with Bo Nix, who we've been talking that they need a legit number one weapon. And they really, outside of Courtland Sutton, really don't have any other weapons that you are really scared of. And I would even argue Courtland Sutton, a little older in age, maybe we want to look to build or add in a young receiver that could be a new solidified number one, especially if Sutton is no longer with the team, I think next year. But you add Evan Ingram to a pretty team-friendly deal, in my opinion. And now the Broncos offensively and defensively look very, very scary. So they're a team, I think, honorable mention to winning the offseason. New England Patriots, defensively, we knew that they were going to be buyers in the market. Ironically enough, a couple of their free agency signings came from former Las Vegas Raiders. So for those Raider nations that were kind of dumping on our players, New England Patriots thought that they were good enough to be on the team. And, as everyone knows, Mike Vrabel's a defensive guy. He's going to look to get after it. And, they've got some guys that are going to get after it. So I think the Patriots did some interesting moves for the defensive side. I'm curious to see what they do offensively. Are they going to spend big money now on a receiver? Probably not. They're probably going to draft a receiver. Hopefully they use a first round pick and actually get a quality receiver for Drake May. But I think the Patriots are very interesting because now with Mike Vrabel and a couple of defensive pieces, like I mentioned, that were just added, I'm curious to see now how aggressive this team looks on the defensive side of the ball and what they can do to make sure that they protect Drake May and also get him weapons to where they can spread the ball around now that Josh McDaniels is also back with the Patriots. But for me, my ultimate winner overall for the AFC in terms of AFC, I have to go with the Buffalo Bills. One, they did get out of the Von Miller contract, which was what I had talked about on Gridiron Address, what they need to do. They were not able to acquire Myles Garrett. He re-signed with the Browns for whatever reason. He wanted to win somewhere, but they threw enough money at him to where he forgot that winning was important to him. But the Buffalo Bills did go out there and get Joey Bosa, who, in my opinion, has a lot left in the tank to where he can go out and he can still get after it. And they did add some really crucial pieces to their defense in terms of linebacking. They were able to get some depth in the cornerback spot and also got a little bit deeper with their interior rush, which is going to be very pivotal to their defense because a lot of the reason why they weren't able to kind of get past the Kansas City Chiefs is because there was really no pass rush that was able to get to Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes, when he went against a good pass rush in Philadelphia, uncomfortable, was making costly, throws that weren't benefiting the team. And Buffalo now offensively could keep up with the Chiefs. Defensively, though, they need to find a way to neutralize the Chiefs. And I think that what they did in the offseason now with free agency, I think is a very big deal. And I actually am very encouraged to see what the Buffalo Bills are going to do now in the next season, especially Josh Allen coming off of an MVP season. And to think that in the draft, I'm curious who they acquire or draft, I should say, because they have been a pretty good drafting team the last few seasons. Keenan Coleman is a great example of a rookie wide receiver that came in, made an immediate impact, and he probably will make another big impact in year 2. And I'm curious to see what the Bills do with whatever they do during the draft, because they've been able to find some hidden gems. So I'm curious to see what they do. I would advise, though, for the Bills not to give any draft picks of any round to the Chiefs, because the last couple of seasons that they have given away draft picks to the Chiefs have acquired high-profile players that have made immediate impact. First one that comes to mind is Xavier Worthy. And I know that the Bills kind of get dumped on this all the time, and they didn't know that it was going to happen, but helping facilitate getting Patrick Mahomes to the Chiefs, that's another one that they're not going to ignore. Now in the NFC, a couple of notable NFC teams I think did a really good job in their free agency, but not the ultimate winner. I still have a different team for that. But one of the first ones I'll lead off with is the LA Rams. Now, there was a lot of questions about what they were going to do with Matthew Stafford. Originally, he was going to be traded. They were able to reconcile, and he was able to sign an extension, staying with the team. Cooper Kupp, on the other hand, wasn't able to stay with the team. The team still elected to let Cooper Kupp go or try to find a trade partner, which they couldn't find because Cooper Kupp ended up getting released. However, they did sign and bring in Davante Adams, California native from Palo Alto, so right there back home in LA with the Rams, which is a pretty good fit. It's a little questionable only because Cooper Kupp is younger than Davante Adams, but one of the things that I think Davante Adams is better than Cooper Kupp is route running and the variety of which the Rams could use him, where Cooper Kupp probably did a lot of his damage in the slot, not a great outside receiver, but Davante Adams, literally put him anywhere on the field. He will get open. He will run the sharpest routes you've ever seen, and he will find a way to get open for Matthew Stafford. And I'm very curious to see, because an argument could be made that Matthew Stafford is more dangerous now with Davante Adams than he was with Cooper Kupp. Don't get me wrong. Cooper Kupp was lethal with Matthew Stafford. They were like this. They were together. They were one mind essentially on the field, and they saw it every which way and was able to dissect defenses. But Davante Adams, in my opinion, this is kind of an upgrade in that receiving area. And if that defense of the Rams can stay healthy, stay young, along with that offensive line, which is young, and if it can also stay healthy, I think the Rams in the NFC just in general could be a sleeper team, because the team that they had constructed last season was able to push the Eagles in the divisional, or was it the wild card round? Or no, the divisional round, excuse me. Was able to push in the divisional round, and still, like, the Rams still gave the Eagles trouble. And now with the Rams having a young defense coming back, I think you upgrade a little bit on the offensive side with Davante Adams, and you bolstered a little bit on the offensive line because you made some signings on that as well. I think that's a key thing of why I think the Rams should be thought of as winners, but more or less honorable mention on my list. Another honorable mention NFC team would be the Chicago Bears. They were probably one of the first teams that came out quickly out of the gates in free agency, wanting to sign as many quality offensive linemen, guards, tackles, you name them, on the team as possible, because Caleb Williams' big issue last year, no protection. And obviously he had plenty of weapons, a bad offense, but had plenty of weapons, not an offensive line. Sacked, I think, 4th highest in the league, always running for his life. Now, don't get me wrong, Caleb Williams was known for like making ad-lib plays, and maybe he got himself in situations where he was sacked when he shouldn't have been because he was holding on to the ball too long. But point being, though, is what's difficult is when your offensive line is breaking down so often, and also just not a very good unit in general. So with what the Bears have done is they have come in, they signed as many of the quality offensive linemen that were available, acquiring even Joe Thuney from the Chiefs, which is a big one. He's 4-time Super Bowl champion. So it's got a little bit left in the tank, enough to help bring up the younger group. And I think with what the Bears are doing is they're doing a really good job at looking to protect Caleb Williams, get the run game going. And now let's see what they do for Caleb Williams in terms of weapons, whether that's in the draft or hopefully Adunze just makes that big leap in his sophomore year because, he had a quiet, rookie year. Let's see in that second year if he takes that step forward. And you still have DJ Moore. Hopefully DJ Moore in this offense with Ben Johnson, maybe it takes a step forward and it looks a little bit more lethal. But I think the Bears are an interesting team that made some pretty good signings. And not only offensively that I've been talking about, but defensively, they added some key pieces. So I think they're very interesting and they're an honorable mention in this list. And then lastly, for an honorable mention before I name the NFC winner, the Seattle Seahawks. You would have thought earlier this offseason, especially with, cutting Tyler Lockett, getting rid of Geno Smith, and then trading away DK Metcalf, you would have thought that, they were having the worst offseason NFL team does. And then they did end up signing Sam Darnold to a pretty team-friendly deal, 3 years, $150 million. I can't remember. I think $100 million of it's guaranteed. So it's a pretty team-friendly deal to help build around it. And then they did also add in Cooper Kupp, who is a very good, obviously, in my opinion, in terms of like knowledge and skill, is an upgrade from DK Metcalf in terms of like route running, precision. Obviously, size, height, you're not going to find another specimen like DK Metcalf that can do that. But the fact that Cooper Kupp now is added to this Seahawks team, I think makes now their offense just a little bit more interesting. They did add some defensive pieces, added a couple of offensive line depth. So I think Seattle made up a little bit in terms of like, getting younger at the quarterback, still putting them in a position where if they wanted to draft a project quarterback, they'd have the ability to do that. But also too, like, not only bringing in Cooper Kupp, still having obviously the rookie sensation, Jackson Smith and Jigba that's on the opposite side, but who knows what they can now bring in, whether it's additionally in free agency or in the draft too. So I'm very interested in that. And now my winner for the NFC, it would be the Washington Commanders. I think acquiring Debo Smith was huge. I think acquiring Tunsil was huge as well, like a big offensive lineman that is exceptional when it comes to blocking and making sure that their quarterback is safe and not sacked, I think is huge. And I think Tunsil is going to elevate this offensive line to another level. For the most part, the Commanders did bring back some key pieces defensively. Bobby Wagner is one that comes to mind, of course, which I think would help the Commanders when it comes defensively. However, though, the Commanders do need to draft a little bit younger in defense, in my opinion, so that way they can keep up with the likes of the Eagles, Cowboys. They're, however they do in the draft, that's still going to be a problem. That's a divisional rival. And then also, too, with just any other NFC team, I can't imagine that Green Bay's defense is not going to come after, the Commanders if ever they see each other, or, the Lions, they still have Dan Campbell and they still have a lot of defensive players that could make a huge impact. So I think that the Commanders really have their work cut out for them. But I think, in my opinion, they won the offseason with some of the offensive additions that they did, offensive linemen, of course. Defensively, I think staying pat and adding some depth, I think was really important. And especially with Jaden Daniels, how he took that big leap forward in his rookie year to get and help the Commanders get to the NFC Championship game, to lose to the eventual Super Bowl champion Eagles. I think the Commanders had a very good offseason. And so far, like, we are still a couple of weeks away from the draft, so who knows what they'll do in the draft. I imagine that, they'll do really well. But I imagine second year with Dan Campbell, second year with Cliff Kingsbury, second year with Jaden Daniels. Commanders, man, I would say watch out. I think they're a very, very interesting team this upcoming offseason. All right, shifting gears a little bit to Aaron Rodgers. Now, this has gone through a roller coaster of an offseason for Aaron Rodgers. It started with, rumors that the Jets were not going to bring him back. Then it was, made official that they weren't going to bring him back. They weren't going to bring Davante Adams back. And the Jets, basically start of the offseason, let both players go, especially Aaron Rodgers. And since free agency, there have been teams that have been tied to Aaron Rodgers. At one point, the Raiders were tied to him because, again, a quarterback. When the Raiders did acquire Geno Smith, then it turned into Seattle was looking at Aaron Rodgers. I was saying I think the New York Giants could have really used Aaron Rodgers. I thought that would have been a better destination just because it's in New York. They're playing at the same stadium. Aaron Rodgers is known to like New York from all accounts, at least from what it sounds like. Pittsburgh is showing interest. I think there was rumors that the Browns, were showing interest. However, I don't think Rodgers would ever side with the Browns. That's another one. The Vikings at one point were interested just because, if they weren't going to bring back Sam Darnold, maybe they go all in and get an Aaron Rodgers. So that way, again, they still have the protection of J.J. McCarthy to allow him to get healthy. But it looks like the Vikings are going to roll with J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, Seattle signed Sam Darnold. And the New York Giants, just yesterday, as again, I'm recording this on Saturday, signed Geno Smith to a pretty friendly 2-year, $8 million backup deal. And, shout out to Jason Colenso from the Boom broadcast team of Three from Deep. He pointed this out, that the Giants adding Geno Smith is just so that way, whatever rookie quarterback that they bring in, whether that is Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, if he falls to the Giants, or if the Giants are crazy enough to trade enough to get the number 1 pick from Tennessee. He even threw out there, even if it's Jackson Dart, the Giants are looking to get a rookie quarterback out of this draft, according to him, which I would agree with the signing with Geno Smith, with Jameis Winston, because Jameis Winston, he did start for the Browns after, of course, Deshaun Watson was injured. And, Winston looked pretty good. He was giving life to that Browns team. Granted, it's Jameis Winston throwing pick sixes and interceptions. I mean, that's what you're going to get out of Geno, out of Jameis Winston. He is going to throw that ball, and he is going to pray that he's delivered from interceptions and pick sixes, because that's what he's known for. Former number 1 overall pick, and he's just turnover prone. Wonderful personality, wonderful person to see on the field. But Winston just, he is a very good quarterback to be motivating and to lift you up, but probably not a quarterback that's going to lead you to a Super Bowl, playoff berth, no nothing. But I think what the Giants doing by adding Jameis Winston is, obviously you get a comparable backup quarterback in there to help and teach the NFL to whatever rookie. I'm going to go ahead and say that, if the Giants have the 3rd overall pick still, they don't jump up to the number 1 overall pick. I think they ultimately walk away there with Shedeur Sanders. I think it makes the most sense. I mean, I don't know if they're confident any other quarterback that is further out besides, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart. And to be truthful, I've seen some mock drafts where Jackson Dart is like drafted, but at the bottom half of the first round. So he went from being maybe a potential 3rd round, maybe even a 2nd round, Jackson Dart did, to now potentially being a 1st rounder. So are the Giants confident that they could get him in another round? Because my Raiders might be interested in getting Jackson Dart if he falls to the 2nd round, where that's probably a possible opportunity for the Raiders to get, Jackson Dart from there. But for all that I've said, that now means that Aaron Rodgers is kind of out of suitors. There's really nobody else that you can think of. Maybe you make the argument that the 49ers might be interested in bringing in Aaron Rodgers because you're not confident in Brock Purdy. But with what the offseason has looked like for the Niners, are they even in a win now kind of situation? Probably not. There's really no other team that you can think of that is a quarterback away as constructed to get them to the Super Bowl, except for one team that might be looking to do so, and that would be the Pittsburgh Steelers. And earlier this week, I believe it was on Thursday or Friday, it was rumored that Aaron Rodgers finally met with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they met for several hours, 6 hours, I think is what Schefter reported. And Rodgers left with no deal, and they'll be in contact. From what it sounds like, that will probably be the destination that Aaron Rodgers ends up with, because that's really the only team that's willing to pay for Aaron Rodgers. He will be 42 in the season that is about to start. And, he is as much of a personality as you can expect. I'm sure he is really good about teaching the game to the younger players and camaraderie and blah, 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 this and that. But there's also a lot of Aaron Rodgers is a cancer. He's not, he doesn't hold himself accountable. He points the finger. And Mike Tomlin already had to deal with George Pickens this past season, where his antics kind of got more out of control. You had DK Metcalf, who is a very good wide receiver addition. But now you're going to think about adding Aaron Rodgers to the mix. And Mike Tomlin is not Robert Saleh. He is not Matt LaFleur. He is not Nathaniel Hackett. He will tell you how it is, and he does not care about your opinion on the situation. And I'm not saying that Mike Tomlin is a tyrant. I mean, he's a player's coach, and players love playing for him. But he's also been the coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers for 18, 19 years now, nearly the same amount of time that Aaron Rodgers has been in the NFL. And Mike Tomlin, yes, he did coach AB when he was on the team, and AB and his antics and all that stuff. But Mike Tomlin has also been able to galvanize the team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and get them to be either above 500, at 500, or sneak into the wild card or the playoffs because of coaching, because of his standard. And people are wanting him out the door. And I can imagine, you're tired of having an above 500 team that falters in the playoffs or in the wild card. Yeah, sure. That would be great. My Raiders, on the other hand, made the playoffs one time since 2016. And before that, they didn't make the playoffs until 2002. So we've made one playoff appearance in 22 years, whereas Mike Tomlin has either made the playoffs or gotten above 500 win during his 18 or 19 years with Pittsburgh. I think that's why, for somebody like my team of why do you want to get rid of Mike Tomlin? But again, moving back to the conversation of Aaron Rodgers, can Mike Tomlin continue this streak of, winning and having his team be above 500 with having a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers? Now, maybe Aaron Rodgers will be better this upcoming season. Last season he was coming off of a recently torn Achilles, and he was still recovering. Although I would make the argument that, his passing ability, his accuracy all fell. All the metrics say that. Sure, he had a pretty decent stat line of, I think he only threw 11 interceptions, 26 touchdowns, I think, and he was just shy of 4,000 yards. Yes, I'm going to say that was better than a majority of the quarterbacks in the league. But Aaron Rodgers also wasn't the difference maker to making the Jets more competitive. If anything, there was a lot of those games where he was the reason why that they were falling behind, or why they lost, or why the team was now coming back from a deficit because of an interception, of a turnover, of a pick six. Aaron Rodgers did play good statistically, but again, stats don't tell the full picture. When you watch how he did, or how he played with the Jets, Aaron Rodgers wasn't Aaron Rodgers. And with Zach Wilson the season prior, the Jets had a better record. That doesn't mean that Zach Wilson's a better passer than Aaron Rodgers. It just means, if we're going based on record and stats, Aaron Rodgers clearly was a step behind, or was a regression compared to Zach Wilson. So ultimately, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to end up signing Aaron Rodgers. I think it's a matter of time before news breaks. I think what I'm annoyed with this whole situation with Aaron Rodgers is how long it's taking. Free agency started 3 weeks ago, and Aaron Rodgers is taking such a long time that teams like the Vikings, teams like the Seahawks, teams like the New York Giants. Now, granted, I'm not trying to say the New York Giants are a better situation than the Pittsburgh Steelers, but my point being is there was a lot more suitors that probably would have liked to have Aaron Rodgers on the team, and probably would have helped make a difference. Pittsburgh, we're assuming that if we add a good quarterback with George Pickens, and now we just add a DK, yeah, they're going to be a really good team, and they had a really good defense. But I'd also make the argument that if you add the wrong player, you're going to set yourself back. Is Aaron Rodgers the wrong player? Maybe. Can he throw the football better than a lot of players in the NFL, like a lot of quarterbacks? Yeah, he's still one of the better throwers of the football, but he only has one Super Bowl championship since 2009. So we're going off of 15 years since then. And really, outside of just, he's won a couple of MVPs. No disagreement of how that's a hard achievement, but really hasn't done anything to elevate his team to where they're Super Bowl contenders. And again, with what Pittsburgh is needing, maybe it would have been a better option to bring back Justin Fields. Maybe it would have been a better option to see about bringing on Sam Darnold because of youth and maybe because he'd be easier to coach. I don't know. But ultimately, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to sign with the Steelers. I just find it frustrating how long it's taking, because I would argue he's taking so long that teams that probably are a good situation or maybe willing to pay him more or whatever the case may be, they're walking away because they don't. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is almost 42 years old. It's not like he has 8 Super Bowls or as many Super Bowls as Tom Brady where he can just elevate your team overnight. He's got 1 Super Bowl. He's got a couple of MVPs, and he's a good quarterback. But, he proclamated that he was going to help bring a championship to the Jets. Never did it. In fact, they were closer to the playoffs when he wasn't quarterback than when he was the starting quarterback. In fact, the Jets regressed when that happened. So, again, I think this is just another offseason of Aaron Rodgers drama that, is the greatest soap opera going right now on TV. So now to talk briefly about my Las Vegas Raiders. And yes, for those that are probably going to see this or any TikTok or Instagram reel that I put out, when I say we as the Raiders, if you're a fan and you're talking about your favorite team, 9 out of 10 times when you refer to we, you're not saying that I'm on the team, but you are a fan of said team. And we just means that like you as the fan of said team is hoping that this happens. You go to any content creator that talks about a specific team. I follow several different Raider content creators. I also follow some other content creators that are fans of other teams. We is just basically an encompassing, like referencing said team because like that's what you're thinking of. It is not like, oh, I'm on the team. Get off that. It is just more or less of like, we is just including what you would want and what you're hoping that the team wants. And yes, there is a togetherness and a connection that you feel with your team, which is why you would like to say we. So anyways, I don't know why I got on that soapbox, but you're welcome. But the Raiders, though, have been very quiet this offseason, other than acquiring Geno Smith, which a lot of people are very excited about, which I'm glad for. We have also re-signed some key players. Adam Butler, Max Crosby, a huge notable one. We have lost some key pieces, like Trayvon Murray, we lost him. Robert Spillane, we lost him. So, I think for this offseason for the Raiders, and I think what's tough too is it's been quiet. Geno Smith was probably the highlight of it all, of acquiring a quarterback that we know is a solidified starter, is going to be a very good bridge. And now whoever we draft is going to have a very solid veteran, teammate to kind of guide him in the NFL when it comes to, reading defenses, playbooks, quarterbacking, all that good stuff. And then since then, it's been a couple of signings here, a couple of signings there. And I'll just speak from my experience as a Raiders fan of what it makes me feel like. It makes me feel like we are losing out if we are not the first one to the table to maybe sign this offensive tackle or guard or lineman, this defensive lineman or whatever. I saw several high name receivers get signed already. It makes me think, well, when are the Raiders going to sign a receiver? And, and I'm going to be honest, with the Raiders being as patient as they are, what I get worried about is we were also patient during the Josh McDaniels tenure, during the Antonio Pierce tenure. And with hiring Pete Carroll, we, referring to the Raiders, figured that having Pete Carroll on the team was not going to be a rebuild because, 76, 77 years old, he didn't have 5 years, 6 years for a rebuild in him. He's got maybe 4 years tops. And to see like, okay, what can we do to make this team competitive? Because the bones are good. Can we get a leader? Can we get someone that's a motivator of men? Can we get the right pieces now to execute the game plan, execute the culture that, Pete Carroll needs to set, along with having John Spytek and, needing to make sure that his player evaluation personnel team does a great job at finding hidden talent. And I think what's difficult is the Raiders are very good at giving us excitement, giving fans excitement. And then free agency just feels like we're missing out on something. We are, having a fear of FOMO, I suppose, having a fear of not being a part of something or missing out. Or if we would have signed this player, maybe we'd have been more competitive, or, maybe this player would have been a difference. And having to trust, and I don't want to say trust the process like the Philadelphia 76ers, but having to just have trust in this new regime, this new leadership. After, again, this is like the third off season just in the last 5 years where we've kind of seen very similar of like kind of slow handful of signings, really nothing pivotal. And you see teams like the Buffalo Bills, like the Kansas City Chiefs, the Denver Broncos. I would even argue the LA Chargers, even teams that are our own division, are spending money to get or acquire or keep, key free agent players on their team to be competitive. And you look at the Chargers, who made the postseason. You look at the Broncos, who also, I think that they did make the postseason as well. You look at, obviously, the Chiefs. They've been in the postseason or winning the Super Bowl every other year. So I would just like to see the Raiders, actually, we have a bunch of cap space, spend the money. I'm sure we're trying to save it to maybe put someone on a long-term contract, but also like we do need some difference makers. And I hope that that's what is at the forefront of their mind, which I imagine that it is. I can't be the only one that's sitting here hoping, fingers crossed, that the Raiders do sign good players, productive players, players that are going to make a huge impact on the Raiders immediately. I can't be the only one that's wishing that. It's not like there's any other Raider fans that are like, oh gosh, I'm so glad that the Raiders are really patient and they keep the same people. I don't want them to get better. I think almost every Raider fan is probably like, man, I'm waiting for that big one, the one where I can get excited, because the Geno Smith is nice. What are we going to do elsewhere? Like, what are we doing for running back? Raheem Mostert, that's okay. What else we got? What do we have more coming up? What are we doing for receiver? What are we doing for linebacker? What are we doing for all these other key positions? So, and now going to talk a handful of these free agency signings in the NFL before I wrap up this segment and move on to the NBA. So, of course, these are a couple of weeks old, so there's nothing new. But if anyone remember, obviously, if you watch SportsCenter every single night as a sports fan, sometimes there's a segment that they play where it's same faces, new places. And I just love to just kind of point this out. And I'm going to talk about player to new place and then just give my thoughts and opinions on it. And then we're going to move on from there. Leading it off, Justin Fields being signed to the Jets. He's going to be reunited with his college wide receiver in Garrett Wilson. Listen, I hope that this works out for Justin Fields. I like him as a quarterback. I feel like his career has really taken a derailment or a step back because of being drafted to Chicago and the situation that he was in. I thought he did really well in Pittsburgh. I didn't think he did bad enough to be benched. I truthfully thought that Justin Fields should have been given the time and the respect to work out whatever the Steelers didn't like about it, because I thought he made that offense look, good in my opinion. And sure, you bring in Russell Wilson, who's a veteran, and he's able to throw these rainbow passes and it looks great. But, Russell Wilson at the end of the season, I think ended as a starter at, 5-4, and Justin Fields, he was pulled after going 4-2 after 6 starts. And, if you're going to get the same record, why not just keep Justin Fields and let him work on that confidence? So anyways, him going with the Jets now, I think this is very interesting. Obviously, I don't know if the Jets obviously are not going to side with Justin Fields long-term. This is just a 2-year deal. He does have a legit number one weapon now, probably hasn't had this quality of a receiver since DJ Moore. So this is really good for Fields, and we'll see. I think if the Jets can build an offensive line around Fields, I think this makes this very interesting, and I'm curious to see how it all works out. I think the Jets are a bottom team anyways, so Justin Fields is going to get all the work he can get in that one for sure. And I did talk about this one earlier with the LA Rams, but Davante Adams to the Rams. Again, I've said this. I love this move for the Rams, and I'm glad that Davante went somewhere that's good. I had predicted he was going to end up in either Baltimore or San Francisco. LA Rams makes a little bit more sense. I think Sean McVay's offense is a very creative one that I think Davante Adams will love. And I think he'll really, really love the way that it's ran, and he'll love having Matthew Stafford as a quarterback. And then this one, again, we talked about it a little bit earlier, Cooper Kupp to Seattle. Cooper Kupp is injury prone now in his career, He's on the older side, but, going with Seattle, which is where he went to college. So he's essentially going back home. Cooper Kupp going to be paired with Sam Darnold is going to be a very good security blanket for Sam Darnold. And I'm very curious to see how the Seahawks do. I think that their offensive line needs a ton of work. And if their running backs can stay healthy, I feel like the Seattle Seahawks could be an interesting team as a wild card. But with how, in my opinion, how strong the Rams are, and I still think the Niners are better than the Seahawks today. I'm curious to see what the Seahawks do. But Cooper Kupp to the Seahawks, I like it. Would I have liked to see him with the Raiders? Sure. But I think this is a really good move for Cooper Kupp. And then, of course, this one probably was more of a shifter in terms of it was more of a shifter in terms of what it meant for the team. And that's DK Metcalf being acquired by the Steelers. Steelers getting a legit number one guy to go next to George Pickens, who George Pickens now doesn't have to be the guy all the time, even though he probably will be on most nights. But I think DK Metcalf now getting a change of scenery and going to a team that's going to be more competitive, especially having a coach and a leader in Mike Tomlin, be a very good addition. And again, assuming if Aaron Rodgers does sign with the Steelers, I think this makes the Steelers a very interesting team. Now, can they coexist and be a cohesive unit and survive the season? We'll see. And again, assuming if Aaron Rodgers signs with the Steelers, but DK to the Steelers, I think is huge. And even if the Steelers do draft a quarterback, I think the Steelers are very interesting for the next few years. Evan Ingram to the Broncos, again, talked about it. I loved it. Another weapon for Bo Nix, super needed and super underrated tight end. And Broncos, again, are just adding tons of talent to their team, and they're going to be a scary team. And I hate to say that because the AFC West is just super competitive. And to have the Broncos now be ultra competitive in it with the team that they have, scary. Najee Harris to the Chargers. I mean, it's okay. Najee Harris has been a good, solid running back. For the Chargers, I mean, he's probably going to be the number one back in a back rotation, and who knows who they bring in as the, second back or whatnot. But Najee Harris is okay. I don't know if he's going to change that much, to be truthful, with the Chargers. Tunsil again to the Commanders. This is a huge offensive line addition for the Commanders and Jaden Daniels to just protect Daniels, and I love it. Sam Darnold to Seattle. That's pretty huge. Team-friendly deal. I did mention this, though, a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about Sam Darnold. I thought he should have stayed with the Vikings because I think Sam Darnold is a product of being a player that succeeded off of really good coaching from Kevin O'Connell and also the offensive system that, was coaching him. Now you go over to Seattle. I don't know if Seattle's going to get the best version of Sam Darnold that Minnesota got. I mean, clearly Sam Darnold got paid and good for him, but my thoughts and feelings were I thought Sam Darnold would have been better off staying with the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell. But, again, Sam Darnold has been through a lot in the NFL, being, drafted by the Jets, that not working out, being sent over to the Carolina Panthers, that not working out. He was with, I think, the 49ers for a little bit. And now with the Vikings, that was phenomenal. Now he has a fresh start in Seattle. So we'll see how it goes. But, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Sam Darnold regress a little bit. But, Seattle did get a bargain for him. And then, of course, Geno Smith to the Raiders. I can't tell you guys how excited this makes me about what that offense will look like now. A couple of players that I think are tied to the Raiders, and I threw this out there on social media. Amari Cooper going back to the Raiders, I think would be very interesting. We still obviously have Brock Bowers as the number one guy. Jacoby Myers as essentially right now the number one receiver, which is comparable, but, want some more depth. Trey Turner, who is a burner, and he got really good last year and only got better as the season wore on. Adding Amari Cooper would be really nice, bring him home. Stephon Diggs, I think, would be a really good addition. Diggs is slightly older than Amari Cooper, not by much, but I think, having an alpha receiver who has been training with Geno Smith, I think would be very, very interesting and makes that offense a little bit more exciting because you got teams that need to worry about Brock Bowers, but then you got Trey Turner who can just take the top off the defense. You got Stephon Diggs who can be an outside receiver, be a slot receiver, and Jacoby Myers who had a 0% drop rate last year. So you put him at any spot and throw him the ball, he's got to come up with it because he's just that good with his hands and with catching. And I think that would be exciting for the Raiders, but it all starts with having Geno Smith and a quarterback that is comparable. AOC's fine. Gardner Minshew, we all know how that worked out, but having Geno Smith, who had a 4,000 year passing, yards last season. Sure, he had high turnovers, but he was also like one of the more sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. And most of your sacks are coming because you're trying to get rid, or most of your interceptions are trying to get rid of the ball to avoid being sacked or pressure. Because again, your offensive line is letting you down. So I don't default Geno Smith, and now he's paired back with the head coach that essentially revitalized his career. And I'm very, very excited for the Raiders and Geno. So, okay, couple of NBA playoffs, just conversation, just a little stuff that's coming around the bend. As I'm recording this right now, the Lakers are playing. I don't know what the score is. I'm not really paying attention to it, but LeBron James is back tonight, which is good because the Lakers have kind of gone about 500, or I think they ended 3-4, I think, while LeBron was out with an injury. One of those games was a loss, but his son had a career high in points. So whatever that is for you. But a couple of newsworthy things is obviously the Cavs have now lost 4 in a row, where the Celtics have won 4 in a row. And so that, games back is shrinking just a little bit now for the Cavs. They did have obviously multiple 15+ game winning streaks. And now they've immediately, have had a 4-game winning streak, 4 consecutive games in a row. So it's a little worrisome if I'm the Cavs. Again, I think that they aren't going to go to the NBA Finals. I think they're the hottest regular season team at the moment, but I still think that in the East, the Boston Celtics are the stronger team, and I ultimately think that Boston is just the outright favorite in the NBA, in my opinion, for who might win the NBA championship. But Cavs have lost 4 in a row. Celtics have won 4 in a row. Rockets, very interesting, have now won 9 in a row. They are really putting a staple on that second seed, and that doesn't look like they're really letting it go. I think they've got like a 4-game lead now over the Lakers, who are sitting at 3rd. Pacers are now in a position where I think they're 1 game behind now the Knicks for the 3rd seed, because the Knicks have lost, I think it's 3 in a row right now. They're really struggling right now without Jalen Brunson. So hopefully they get Jalen Brunson back. But Indiana Pacers are making some noise right now in the East, where they have an opportunity to solidify that 3rd place seeding, which would actually get them, I believe, the Detroit Pistons. So that would be a very interesting matchup. And I do have 2 sleeper teams in the East and 2 sleeper teams in the West that I think top seeds need to worry about. And a lot of it is because, again, top seeds, at least as far as the NBA goes, it's very rare that, a number 1 seed in conferences outright just go through everybody. Warriors come to mind when they had KD, San Antonio Spurs, Cavs when they're in the East with LeBron. But I've got 2 teams in the East that I think are going to be sleepers that I think teams need to be weary of in said conferences. And so in the East, I got the Bucks and I have the Detroit Pistons. Detroit Pistons, I don't know how far they'll go. They're not NBA final worthy. Maybe pushing the cusp of a semifinals. But I just think that they are just a team that is dealing with magic. They got a lot of momentum, a lot of heart. And I think where they're at now to where they were last year is a huge testament to the leadership of the Pistons and the players that they brought in, and just the overall attitude to change that organization to be winners. I think it's great. Cade Cunningham is honestly probably the runaway for most improved, even though he's been doing this for several years. Now that he's doing it in games that matter, it just is elevating that sense. And honestly, if he continues this trajectory, maybe Cade Cunningham just now starts to look like he's in the running for face of the NBA, because the NBA is needing an American face in the league. And Cade Cunningham is doing something that is nearly impossible, and that's making Detroit relevant. So I like Detroit in the East. Also the Bucks, former champions, with Doc Rivers, the Greek Freak, Dame Lillard. I think that this team, when they get in the playoffs, could surprise some people, and, they could take a series or so because of experience. Giannis with championship experience, Kyle Kuzma with championship experience. But, will the Bucks make it all the way? Probably not. But I think that they are a team to be just a little concerned with, because, again, the experience and the leadership. And, when you have Giannis on the team, he is such a difference maker that you hope that you can find a way to neutralize him, or obviously, have a player on your team that could neutralize the impact that Giannis is going to have for the Bucks. And in the West, I have the LA Clippers, which Clippers, when they're healthy with James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Zubac now, kind of weird to kind of throw that out there. And with the collection of pieces that they have, Norman Powell, they are a very scary team. And they have a lot of pieces to go deep into the playoffs. Like Tyronn Lue is a really good coach, and they've got a lot of good pieces where the LA Clippers, I don't want to say they can, beat anybody in a 7-game series, but you don't want to face this team when they're hot, feeling confident. James Harden is playing like James Harden of old, but still being a very good contributor. And Kawhi Leonard, if he can stay healthy and really bring in that defensive presence that he's known for and is a scoring ability, those two on the court at the same time, so good. And then you have Zubac, who is just a double-double machine, and he had a very impressive 28-20 game last week, and I think it was against the Cavs. Very, very impressive team. And I think the Clippers are a team to be really kind of concerned with it. If they kind of pull it all together towards the end of the season, into the postseason when it matters the most, like I'm too scared to say, but I mean, they could make some noise. And then, of course, the Warriors. Now, the Warriors did suffer a pretty big loss with, Steph Curry being injured, fell on his tailbone, and he's probably going to be out for a while. But they did acquire Jimmy Butler for this particular reason. Draymond Green, actually, with Jimmy Butler on the team, has actually been a better scorer. And I think a lot of it is because defenses now can't just put 4 guys on Steph Curry and leave everybody else. They now have to respect Steph Curry. They have to respect Jimmy Butler. And that also means that they got to now respect Draymond Green, because Draymond Green is actually shooting a pretty comparable, shooting percentage, not only from like 2s, but actually making some 3s that are making a difference. So not only is he a defensive presence, getting rebounds at crucial times, and also a facilitator, but he now, I wouldn't say he's a bona fide scorer, but he's now contributing on the scoring side, which makes this Warriors team very, very interesting, especially when Steph Curry comes back. A couple of games ago before Steph Curry got injured, the Warriors, I think, were like 15-2 with Jimmy Butler, or since they acquired Jimmy Butler and since he's been in the lineup. So that right there is super important with how they've been playing, because they're not outscoring them by a lot. They're not the Splash Brothers of old. They are just like, you got Steph Curry, who's able to wear down the defense with how much he runs around the court. You have Jimmy Butler, who can get you a shot in the mid-range and who could contribute not only on the glass, but also can be a distributor of the ball when it comes to it. And then you got Draymond Green, who can do the same thing, but more of a defensive presence. And again, championship level. Jimmy Butler is really the only one on that team that doesn't have a championship, but he's been to the finals twice. So he knows what it takes in the postseason to get to the NBA finals. He just needs to win it. Well, here's the thing. Steve Kerr, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and a couple of other players too on the Warriors, they're champions. They know how to win as well. So I think the Warriors are a very interesting team in the West. Again, OKC, though, is running away with the West, and you still got the Lakers that are in there. You have the Houston Rockets. So not saying that the Warriors are going to just leapfrog everybody, but, with, again, their championship experience in the playoffs, it becomes more of a more of aggressive of a game, to where, mid-range is kind of important, but if you can shoot the 3 and make shots when it matters, it's important. And the Warriors are a team that makes shots when it matters the most. So I find that very, very interesting. And I would say, like, they are a team that should not be slept on. So, and then just going to talk briefly about this happened a couple of weeks ago, last week, I think specifically, and I'm just now having an opportunity to really kind of give my thoughts on it. And of course, this is regarding when LeBron James confronted Stephen A. Smith, First Take's own Stephen A. Smith. I think ironically was the day when it was announced that Stephen A. signed his $100 million agreement with ESPN, ironically enough. And obviously there's that clip that's going around of LeBron James confronting Stephen A. Smith, and Stephen A. Smith addressed it on First Take, where He basically said that LeBron was coming to him, telling him not to say anything more about, Bronny, to leaving him out, telling Stephen A to leave him out of it. And he, that's my son. And this, that, and the other. Stephen A. Smith had to go on First Take and address it. And he's done so on further podcasts as well. I think Gilbert Arenas podcast, Stephen A. Smith kind of gave a little bit more context that he was allowed to say that wasn't on ESPN airwaves. And, I've seen a lot of opinions on all different spectrums about, like, people are siding with LeBron for, confronting Stephen A. People are siding with Stephen A about how LeBron addressed it and how it was kind of wrong. And there's some opinions in between. And I think what my opinion is, and it's going to be multi-layered. I'm not going to say LeBron is right, Stephen A is wrong, or the vice versa. Here's what I've always been saying. I think Bronny James is an NBA player. I think, we saw him in high school. He wasn't, the number one prospect in high school. He didn't need to be, but he's a good player. He's, the son of probably the greatest basketball player that the NBA has ever seen. And he's grown up essentially in the NBA, around NBA facilities, around some of the best coaches in the NBA that you're ever going to come across. There's clips of when Bronny was in high school training with the Lakers, with LeBron at the facility, getting quality, coaching tips and drills and stuff like that from top NBA assistant coaches in the league. I mean, there's a great clip of Phil Handy, I think, is not only coaching up and helping improve Austin Reeves, but also Bronny James. And I don't even think he was with USC at the time yet. I think he was still in high school. But the point being is, did Bronny get drafted because of LeBron James? Yeah, probably. Let's be honest, because LeBron did put it out there that, whatever team drafted Bronny, LeBron was going to find a way to play with his son. Kind of walked it back a little bit. But to be truthful, I could see LeBron doing that. But, again, Bronny was, on draft boards, maybe a second rounder, maybe undrafted. And, they did everything they can to get him on the Lakers, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, if he went undrafted, he probably would have signed with the Lakers anyways. So I'm not sure why people are upset that Bronny's in the NBA because of nepotism. There's a lot of executives, employees, coaches that are probably taking over jobs because of nepotism, because their parent is in the organization in some form or fashion. So what's the big deal if it's Bronny? Now, what I will say, though, is Bronny, 19 years old, being a rookie, is he ready for the big time of the NBA? No. I mean, imagine putting a second-round pick in the Lakers' regular rotation. Obviously, any player, it doesn't have to be Bronny James, could be any player, would not look like they're ready to play. But I think what the difference is with Bronny, again, he's got a father in LeBron James who is going to give him every tool and resource to make him better if Bronny chooses to be. And what I had said too when Bronny got drafted is Bronny's probably going to be in the G League. And really, he got called up to the main roster for first game. Yes, it was a publicity stunt for the Lakers to have Bronny and LeBron be the first father-son duo to be in a regular season game together. Yeah, that was planned. That's okay. The NBA does a lot of stuff that's pre-planned, that's theatrical. Who cares about this one? In my opinion, it didn't bother me. I kind of expected it. And if it didn't happen, I'd be more like, well, what the heck happened? Now, aside from all that, Bronny James, again, even in the few games that he played minimal minutes and even still played garbage minutes, he basically had minutes as if he was the last player on the bench, deservingly so, earning his way and having to prove himself doing, the day in and day out stuff of, an NBA rookie, which he's not absolved of. And I'm sure LeBron wants him to get familiar with all that. Didn't look great. And Stephen A voiced his opinion that he doesn't look great, doesn't look like he should be on the main roster. And that's Stephen A's opinion. And Stephen A himself even said, Bronny doesn't look like he's ready for the NBA roster. He doesn't look like he's ready to be a rotational player or a player that can contribute anything right now. He's too young, too raw, needs to train and get familiar with NBA speeds in the G League. Now, Stephen A did make some comments about LeBron, the father, like that, you're the one that's doing this to your son. That's kind of true. I mean, LeBron is kind of the reason why Bronny is on the Lakers. Is LeBron the reason why Bronny gets minutes in the NBA? I guess, but it's not like he's telling JJ Redick to put him in games at certain times. So, I think what Stephen A was trying to do was just saying, look, if you don't want your son criticized, you don't put him in a position where he's going to get critiqued on how he plays or how poorly he plays in certain situations or certain matchups. Be wary of that. But, Bronny going to the G League and really doing well. I think he's averaging like 20 points in the G League. He's like a 5-5 kind of a player in the G League. Very, very good. And to be truthful, compared to second round players, yeah, he's the best second round player so far, but he's also the player that's probably getting the most experience with traveling with the main roster, training with the main roster in practice, going to the G League, playing pretty, good competition, but not as good as competition what's on the main roster, and in getting all that. And also not only that, but all the practices and training in between. And yeah, he had a career high against Milwaukee a couple of nights ago of 17 points, which is great. Very good for Bronny. And now it's like, people are trying to really come down on Stephen A about it. He said he might be wrong. And Stephen A has said this on multiple podcasts before, and I've heard him say this, that he makes like 3,000 or 4,000 predictions a season of any sport multiple times. He's going to get a lot wrong, but he's also going to get a lot right. And I mean, no one really knows if Bronny is going to shape out. He had one good game in the NBA of 17 points. He did not have a 50-point game. It wasn't 40 points. It was pretty good shooting from three, very efficient from the field, but it was okay. Let's not act like it was some magical triple-double that we've never seen before. I think because it's Bronny and we're excited, we're rooting for Bronny, which is great. But I don't think at the same token that we should just also put what Bronny does above like, oh, this is so magnificent. Like, yeah, I'm glad that he had a really good game. Maybe he can play in this league after all, which I believed he could anyways. But I think in my opinion, what this whole situation is it does look like LeBron is taking really pivotal steps to protect Bronny from media. And if that's going after Stephen A, and I don't know if that's directly at Stephen A, maybe that's just, circumventing him directly because, a lot of people say that Stephen A basically runs sports media now because of his stature. And maybe that's true, but I think what makes it difficult is, again, I can understand LeBron being very protective of his son, but at the same time too, like your son is also a product of a situation that you benefited from, so he benefits from. And he's also in a profession that you're in a profession. You are one of the best basketball players to ever lace him up, and your son needs to prove himself. And that does not mean that he won't be, absolved of all of criticism. If he's going to have a bad game, they're going to say it. Now, maybe, people are criticizing him harsher than they should for a second round 55th overall pick, but not a lot of 55th overall picks are the son of an NBA legend with the last name James. So I think what's interesting about this whole thing is I can completely understand LeBron's side of wanting to protect his son, but I kind of can also understand more so of like, look, your son's going to just have to learn that, you can't protect him from all criticism. Like, yeah, sure, go after Stephen A and say this and say that. Stephen A is still going to do his job. He's going to praise you when you do bad, but he's also going to point it out when you don't. Like that's Stephen A. He has not. I've been watching First Take and ESPN since I was 12, so we're talking over 20 years now. Kind of weird to say that out loud, but I've been watching Stephen A for a long time in First Take and when he was on Sports Center, and he does say a lot of outlandish things, but he also is, from what I've seen, at least when it comes to players, pretty fair. Like, does he favor some players? Sure. But he also is very much, we'll call it how he sees it. And he's had former and current players call him out, and he'll come right back at them or acknowledge that he's wrong and he'll correct himself. He's very, very much doing so of that. So, I mean, this is just a very complex, layered situation of like people wanting Bronny to fail because of his dad. And there's a lot of people that are pointing that because of his dad, that's why he's in the NBA. He's not even an NBA talent, this, that, and the other. I'm not in that camp, but then there's a lot of people that, like me, are like, look, Bronny is going to be okay. He's going to fail, and we shouldn't be very critical about that. But, again, it comes with the territory. This is what it is. And, hopefully he does succeed, but not a great look for LeBron, not a great look for Stephen A. I'm going to be honest. It's not like there's anyone that walks out of this great. And this will probably be a conversation for a lot of different reasons. And, I'm sure it'll come back if Bronny goes 0 for 9 in garbage time, or if he goes, 9 for 9 in garbage time or in a pivotal game. So who knows? But all right. Anyways, guys, that is it for Drew Code. I'm done. I've got through all my notes, and I really appreciate you guys for sticking around and listening to me yammer. And I really would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are about the subject that I've talked about. So please, if you guys are listening on the audio side, please comment down below or leave a review of the show. Really would appreciate that. If you guys are watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. That's very important. Please subscribe, turn on notifications so you know when we either have a new episode or a new video that comes out. That'd be awesome. And again, thank you for 400 subscribers. Let's get another 400. Let's be really crazy, and let's get 800, huh? That'd be wild. If I saw 800, I don't know what I would do, but it seems like such a small number. But I think, never thought that this would be anything that Drew and I could do. And the fact that 400 subscribers later, it seems exciting. Like, oh my gosh, we would have felt like we hit the lottery. But it's really cool that people are willing to subscribe to watch us. And so hopefully we get another 400 or another number that is just as exciting, or another milestone, and I'll be super excited for it. But again, please subscribe to this YouTube channel as I am yammering on yet again, and comment down below what your thoughts are on either the winners of the AFC or NFC free agency, what your thoughts are about the Aaron Rodgers situation or the NBA situation. Would love to hear it. So be kind to one another, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week when we have a new episode. And check us out on social media as mentioned. And with that being said, I will bid you all adieu. I'll see you.